Recently, there has been a whole lot of talk from both presidential candidates about removing taxes on tips.
It's called no tax on tips. No tax on.
Now, President-elect Donald Trump is the one who had recently proposed this, but it actually was proposed in 2007 from Republican Ron Paul when he had created the Tax-Free Tips Act. Now, one of the most surprising things about this is that it's bipartisan, meaning that Kamala Harris agrees that we should go ahead with it as well.
Here, when I am president, we will continue our fight for working families of America, including eliminate taxes on tips for service and hospitality workers.
Now, the concept is simple. Those who work in industries where they rely on tips, such as bartenders or waiters, would essentially get those tips and they would not be taxed. But is this really a good idea? Couldn't somebody in a regular job, such as something like a sales associate, basically say, hey, you know what, I was paid in tips. I was never paid a salary. And would they then be able to bypass taxes completely with that? And also, what would be the overall impact in terms of lost tax revenue? Now, I couldn't help but wonder these things, so I asked my buddy a question. Howdy, AI. If we remove taxes on tips, what's the financial impact?
That's a good question, and I think we can break this conversation down into 5 different parts to give you a complete answer. Currently, tips are considered taxable income in the United States. This means they are subject to federal income taxes and payroll taxes, which include Social Security and Medicare taxes.
Now, this all made sense, but I wondered, how were tips currently taxed and how does the government manage that process?
Employers have specific responsibilities when it comes to reporting and withholding taxes on tips. If an employee receives more than $20 in tips in a month, they must report this to their employer by the 10th of the following month. Employers then withhold taxes based on the total wages and reported tips.
Got it. I actually didn't know that the employer is supposed to withhold all those taxes and report them to the IRS. That makes a lot of sense because I'm sure that it reduces fraud. Though, admittedly, I'm willing to bet the cash tips aren't reported as much as they should be. And then I got to wondering exactly how many people will this actually impact?
Approximately 4 million individuals, or about 2.5% of the overall workforce, are employed in tipped positions that could potentially benefit from the removal of taxes on tips. These jobs primarily include roles in the service and hospitality industries, such as waitstaff and bartenders, ride-share drivers and food couriers, hairstylists, and hotel employees. However, it's important to note that many of these workers earn low wages, and a significant portion already pay little to no federal income taxes due to their income levels. As a result, the actual number of people who would see a substantial benefit from eliminating taxes on tips might be limited.
All right, I get it. The entire concept here sounds good, but the whole idea and the premise of it is actually very, very flawed. The premise of not taxing people who have low-income jobs, it sounds good. It makes a great headline, right? But at the end of the day, these people, they have low-income jobs, they're getting cash tips that they're not even reporting anyway. So it really isn't going to help them very much as it is. But I really wanted to dive deeper into the numbers of these issues and see the true financial and economic impacts.
The proposal to remove taxes on tips carries significant financial and economic implications. Here are some key points to consider. First is revenue loss. Eliminating taxes on tips could lead to a substantial decrease in federal revenue. Estimates suggest that exempting tips from both income and payroll taxes could result in a revenue shortfall of $150 billion to $250 billion over the next decade. This shortfall could exacerbate the national debt and strain government resources, impacting programs like Social Security and Medicare that rely on payroll tax revenues.
Now, let's make it clear, the U.S. does not need another $250 billion in lost tax revenue that will negatively impact the national debt. We're already $35 trillion in the hole at this point. And if you ask me, not even that I'm an economist, but if you ask me, I think that we should prioritize not giving more incentives, but actually finding a way to dig ourselves out of that hole instead of digging deeper where we can't even get out of it.
Second is the impact on workers. While the policy could increase take-home pay for some workers, particularly in the service and hospitality industries, Many tipped workers already earn too little to pay federal income taxes. As a result, a significant portion of these workers might not see much benefit from the tax exemption. Additionally, there is a concern that employers might use this policy to shift more compensation to tips rather than wages, potentially leading to less stable income for workers.
Now, this is exactly what I thought of when I heard this proposal, right? So the idea of putting people to where they're no longer on a salary, they get 100% tips, it all sounds great. But what happens when tip fatigue, which is already a thing, by the way, what happens when that gets so bad that some people just decide, you know what, I'm not going to tip? Now these people have no income at all. And I have to say, if they do this, they're going to have to make the rules really clear for businesses and maybe set a minimum wage to the side or whatever else it may be, because I can absolutely see this getting abused by so many different parties.
Lastly is economic fairness. Critics argue that the policy could create disparities between tipped and non-tipped workers, potentially incentivizing businesses to prioritize tips over wage increases. This could lead to a two-tiered tax system where tipped workers enjoy a tax advantage, raising questions about fairness in the tax system.
Now, I personally don't think it's a big deal if tipped workers get a tax advantage. It's a tough job, and they're really not making a killing anyway, so who cares? But I will say, I can understand other people that are working minimum wage jobs looking at this and saying, hey, that's really, really unfair. Now, those were all really good insights, but I wanted to know more about the long-term consequences of this, and AI definitely didn't let me down.
The proposal to eliminate taxes on tips carries 3 additional long-term consequences that should be considered that we haven't already discussed. Impact on Social Security and Medicare. By not taxing tips, workers would report lower taxable incomes, which could reduce their future Social Security and Medicare benefits. This is because these benefits are calculated based on reported earnings. Over time, this could disadvantage workers when they retire or require medical care.
See, I love it when AI comes up with stuff like this. So while it makes a good headline, the reality is these individuals, they're not going to be paying much into Social Security or Medicare, or anything like that. And the problem there is that when they do eventually decide to retire, the way that that works and the way that the payments come to you is however much you put in is what you get out. Well, guess what? They're not going to be putting anything in. So depending on how long they're working at these jobs, it could really have a negative impact in their future when they're at retirement age. And if they're trying to live off Social Security, forget about it.
Effect on tipping culture. The policy might exacerbate the already contentious tipping culture in the U.S., leading to more pressure on consumers to tip and potentially reducing the predictability and stability of workers' income.
Thank you. Just for future reference, drivers live off a tip, so if y'all don't tip, we don't make money.
Kidding me, dude? $1 tip?
Now, I could see this becoming a huge problem as well. The other day, I kid you not, I went to a movie theater, and at the ticket kiosk, they asked me to leave a tip for the ticket that they didn't even print out, literally print out on a little thing. I basically just rolled my eyes, I walked away. But tipping fatigue is real. And the more places that ask for tips, people are getting really tired of it. I'm sure there's people out there that don't even tip at all anymore just out of principle.
Challenges to minimum wage increases. By focusing on tax-free tips, the policy could detract from efforts to raise the minimum wage for tipped workers, which might offer more substantial and equitable benefits.
Now, this is another thing that didn't even pop into my head, right? I could see a situation where, people are lobbying for a minimum wage increase, but these particular workers will never be impacted by that. And businesses will frankly just say, well, we're not going to increase the minimum wage. We don't need to, because all of our workers, they're just living off of their tips and that's what they get. But at the end of the day, if those tips don't keep up with, lifestyle and things like that, those individuals are really out of luck and they're not going to have a minimum wage to protect them. Now, to me, that sounds like a policy that's definitely going to get abused by not all employers, but definitely some of them. Frankly, I didn't think of many of the consequences of this particular proposal. And I don't think a lot of people are, right? You hear the headline and you think, yeah, they're low-paid workers. Why not? Why tax them on tips? But at the end of the day, going through this with AI, you can really see how it actually might not be a good idea at all. And it's kind of surprising that it's got bipartisan support, because there's so many negatives and chances of this getting abused that it really just, I'm not convinced at the moment. So what are your thoughts? Do you think that in my conversation with AI that maybe we missed a few things? I'd love to hear from you sincerely. If you could, go ahead and comment and let me know what you think. And as always, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Basically helps me with the YouTube algorithm get recommended to others. So I really, really appreciate that. You have no idea how far that goes for me to, encourage me to keep making more of these videos. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.